What's up, guys? In today's video, we're breaking down everything that's been shaking up the bodybuilding world this week. There's been controversy involving Mr. Olympia, a heated debate about height and classic physique, an athlete training in a secret location, a crazy physical transformation, and even a deeper conversation about ego and humility in the sport. So go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop your opinion in the comments, because today's topic is. Let's get into it. Let's start with one of the most talked about stories of the week. The current Mr. Olympia, Derek Lunsford, was seen training and posing alongside Larry Wheels during Larry's international content tour. At first, it looked like just another collaboration video, but it quickly turned into a full-blown debate. When the best bodybuilder in the world shares the stage with a powerlifter, the public expectation is simple. The superiority should be obvious. The key detail here is that Derek is in his off-season. He's not in prep. He's not stage lean. He's not carrying that razor-sharp conditioning that won him the biggest title in the sport. And anyone who follows him knows he rarely shows his physique outside of peak competitive shape. Even so, the size is still insane. Thick structure, crazy muscle volume, champion-level frame. But without that stage refinement, the perception shifts, especially for casual fans who don't understand the fine details of bodybuilding. And that leads to the unavoidable question. Should Mr. Olympia look visually superior to athletes from other disciplines no matter what phase he's in? For the general audience, the difference between the two didn't look as dramatic as many expected. Another angle that resurfaced in the discussion is height in the open division. Modern pro bodybuilding has been dominated by shorter athletes. Technically, that's not an issue. But from a visual impact standpoint, does it matter? Imagine Andrew Jacked or Samson Dauda standing next to Larry. Would the presence feel different? Would perception shift automatically just because of overall frame and height? There's also a recurring criticism. Derek isn't overly visible. He doesn't post constantly. He doesn't show everything. He's not always in front of the camera. In a sport that depends heavily on promotion and exposure, does that hurt the image of the champion? Should the title holder take on a more active role as an ambassador for bodybuilding? Or are we blowing this out of proportion over one off-season video? I want to hear your take in the comments. If the open division sparked debate, classic physique wasn't far behind. The new controversy centers around Wesley, who revealed on a podcast that he plans to compete measured at 6 feet 4 inches instead of 6 feet 3 inches. That might sound like just about a 1-inch difference, roughly 2.5 centimeters. But in classic physique, that changes everything. Here's the part many people overlook. That small height increase could allow for about 4 extra kilograms, which is roughly 8 to 9 additional pounds, under the division's weight cap. And in classic physique, for kilograms, around 9 pounds, is a big deal. We're talking more muscle volume, more density, more stage presence, without exceeding the allowed weight limit. So this isn't just about aesthetics. It's a real competitive edge. Wesley made it clear he's going to pursue that higher measurement. He believes he can hit that height, and according to him, he'll keep trying until he does. That instantly brought up Mike Sommerfeld's name, since he's faced similar questions in the past. For years, there's been speculation about measurements placing him a few centimeters taller than what many believed was his actual height. Coincidence? Strategy? Or just smart use of the rules? And that's where the real debate begins. Is this manipulation? Or simply maximizing the rulebook in your favor? Techniques like spinal decompression, posture adjustments during measurement, and even the time of day, since people can measure slightly taller in the morning, can influence a few millimeters. It may sound minor, but in professional bodybuilding, minor details can make a major difference. Now let's talk about one of the most eye-catching physiques in the game right now. Krizo showed up 11 weeks out from the Pittsburgh Pro claiming he's sitting at 140 kilograms. That's about 308 pounds. That number grabs attention instantly. But like everything in bodybuilding, context is everything. What kind of weight are we talking about here? Fasted in the morning? After several meals? Fully clothed? Post-workout pump? A more realistic breakdown suggests that his true body weight under standard conditions, morning, fasted, no pump, could be closer to 132 to 135 kilograms, which translates to roughly 291 to 297 pounds. And honestly, that doesn't take anything away from his physique. Even in that range, He remains one of the biggest and most structurally impressive athletes in today's open division. What really stands out, though, isn't just the number on the scale. It's the look. Even in relaxed poses, Krizo carries a surprisingly aesthetic structure for someone that massive. His waist looks relatively controlled, his delts are round and popping, his arms dominate every frame, and his chest has that exaggerated, almost comic book superhero vibe. At the same time, he's not known for dramatic year-to-year transformations where he suddenly adds 8 or 10 kilograms. That's 18 to 22 pounds of new muscle. His progress tends to be steady and calculated. What we usually see is gradual refinement rather than explosive-sized jumps. And maybe that's exactly what he needs right now. Not more mass, but more polishing. Looking ahead to the Pittsburgh Pro or even the New York Pro, everything will depend on the lineup. Does he have the structure to win? Absolutely. But he'll need to fine-tune his posing, smooth out his transitions, and most importantly, dial in that final stage conditioning. At this level, details decide everything. The next update involves one of the most intense names in the sport today, Hadi Choopan. A video surfaced of him training back in an undisclosed location. The setting looked simple, closed off, almost mysterious. And that immediately raised questions. Where is he? Why the secrecy? The situation around him seems delicate and uncertain, but one thing is clear, he's still training hard. Despite whatever uncertainties may be surrounding him, Hadi remains locked in on the Arnold Classic. In the footage, he's doing his trademark T-bar rows with that raw, aggressive execution we're used to seeing. It might not look textbook perfect, but it's the style that built his physique. And when you see the weight he's moving and the intensity behind it, it's obvious he's not backing off. Recent photos suggest his conditioning is coming along nicely. The muscle density still looks there, and separation is starting to show. Of course, social media always brings debate. Lighting? Filters? Editing? But the stage doesn't lie. There's no Photoshop under competition lights. That's where everything gets confirmed. There are also rumors he might compete at the Arnold UK as well. If that happens, the schedule becomes even more demanding. And let's be real, this could be the most challenging year of Hadi's career. Not just physically, but emotionally and logistically. The pressure is massive. And there's one factor you can't ignore, the prize money. We're talking about totals approaching $1 million when you combine major events. That changes the stakes. That changes the motivation. Hadi has already proven he can perform under extreme pressure. The question now is this: is all this mystery a sign of struggle or quiet preparation for something big? If bodybuilding teaches us anything week after week, it's that things can flip fast. Hassan Mustafa recently posted an update that sparked heavy criticism. He looked off, soft, lacking clear separation, far from what you'd expect in the later stages of prep. A lot of people basically wrote him off. Then a new video dropped, and suddenly the conversation shifted. In the latest footage, Hassan appears under strong lighting, noticeably drier, and overall much sharper. His upper body, especially chest, shoulders, and arms, looks fuller and more detailed. The density is there. The overall look is completely different. And that highlights a truth we sometimes forget. In bodybuilding, timing is everything. There are still some areas to watch. His legs appear to be holding more water compared to his upper body, and the separation isn't quite matching the torso yet. But that can come down to final week adjustments, diet manipulation, water balance, and peak week strategy. The muscular base is undeniable. And when we talk about Hassan, we're talking about serious mass. This situation brings up an important reflection. Unlike team sports where performance stays relatively consistent over a season, bodybuilding physiques can change dramatically from one week to the next. Lighting, pump, angles, even the time of day, all of it matters. How many times have we seen an athlete look off in a random photo, only to shock everyone on stage days later? If Hassan keeps progressing at this pace in the final weeks, he could absolutely become one of the biggest surprises of the show. Now let's talk about a name that might not be making headlines every single week, but definitely deserves attention: Colossus Ken. A recent national champion turned pro, he entered the circuit with solid expectations. But unlike some of the explosive newcomers we've seen in recent years, like Nick Walker, his pro debut wasn't a shockwave moment. It wasn't that instant impact where the whole division suddenly feels threatened. But not every athlete needs to burst onto the scene overnight. And that's exactly where Ken's story starts getting interesting. His most recent offseason looks extremely productive. More density, more muscle maturity, and a frame that was already impressive now appearing more complete. He's not rushing the process. He's building. What really stands out is his structural foundation. Wide shoulders, strong lines, balanced proportions. He still needs refinement and maybe a bit more aggression on stage, but the genetics are clearly there. And in pro bodybuilding, that's half the battle. The question was never about potential. It's always been about time. Looking at this season realistically, solid placings are absolutely possible. A second place here, a top 3 there. A win? Not impossible, but it would require elite conditioning and the right lineup. Even if that doesn't happen immediately, the trajectory suggests steady growth. Colossus Ken feels like the type of athlete who doesn't explode all at once, but improves year after year until he becomes a real threat. A midterm project. And often, those are the ones who surprise everyone when the moment finally comes. Are we watching the early stages of a future champion in the making, or just another promising talent trying to break through? Next up is Reagan Grimes, and here the feeling is almost déjà vu. New off-season update, new photos, but the overall impression? Very similar to what we've seen the past few years. He's still big, full, dense, but there's no dramatic shift that makes people stop and say, okay, now he's on a different level. Reagan typically hovers around 298 pounds, roughly 135 kilograms, and that number has almost become part of his brand. The issue is, while the weight stays consistent, so does the visual impact. There's no standout new body part, no obvious leap forward that changes his competitive position. And that raises an important point. In modern bodybuilding, visible progression is almost mandatory. The athletes who climb the rankings usually show clear year-to-year improvements. In Reagan's case, the physique remains strong, but without that sense of upgrade. Has he hit a plateau? Interestingly, the narrative often shifts once prep begins. As he leans out week after week, things get more exciting. Conditioning brings contrast. The physique looks sharper and more dramatic. But during the off-season, the updates can start to feel repetitive. Always big, rarely surprising. Reagan still has the structure and genetics to compete at a high level. The real question is whether we'll see a genuine transformation that pushes him firmly into the top tier, or if he'll continue being that athlete who's always in the mix but never quite makes the final leap. To close out today's updates, we need to talk about Patrick Moore. Back in 2019, he achieved something many athletes dream of, a top 10 finish at the Mr. Olympia. At that moment, it felt like the future was wide open. Great structure, classic lines within the open division, and plenty of confidence. The expectation was steady upward momentum in the years that followed. But what happened next was a decline in performance. Results started slipping. In smaller shows, he wasn't able to recreate the same impact he had in 2019. Meanwhile, on social media, the tone remained bold. Strong statements about being the future, about dominating the division, without results backing it up. Recently, though, something changed. In a new post, Patrick admitted that the price he paid for not being humble was astronomical. That's a heavy statement. A public acknowledgement that maybe his mindset wasn't aligned with reality. And in bodybuilding, mental maturity matters just as much as muscle density. The stage doesn't respond to words, it responds to physiques. The potential has always been there. Solid structure, favorable genetics, strong stage presence. The main issue was a lack of progression in overall size and impact. While other athletes leveled up, he stayed mostly the same, or even regressed. In today's open division, standing still is the same as falling behind. Now the big question remains, could this shift in mentality signal a real comeback? Sometimes a reality check is exactly what an athlete needs to rebuild. Humility can be the first step toward growth. Are we about to see a new version of Patrick Moore, or did his peak already pass?